Good evening, everyone. And maybe for some of you it's good afternoon. Sanshinji's network is so global. I've been talking.
Recording in progress.
I have received this opportunity to speak 10 times during the summer ango. Maybe some of you didn't want to hear last week, so I'm just going to briefly explain what I'm trying to do. Last week I was briefly trying to explain this and I spent one whole hour, so I'll be very succinct. So my wish to achieve during these 10-time talks is I really see Genzo-e by Ukumalogy is a pinnacle event for not only for Sanshinji but the entire Buddhist community. And at the same time, Genzo-e is very difficult. Dogen's writing is very difficult. So I really want to utilize this opportunity to entice people to come to see, experience Genzo-e. And at the same time, I wanted to offer some sort of kind of like, I actually utilized several other texts so that I can understand a little better or enjoy more Genzo-e. So I decided to bring several texts. It's almost like a Shogunzo is a pinnacle, and it's the peak of this huge mountain. And then these texts are a bit like a slopes or skirts of this huge mountain, and then kind of supports you to climb up to this mountain. And then by doing so, I'm introducing all these wonderful commentaries by our direct ancestors of our lineage, namely Sawaki Roshi and Ukumalogy, and of course Ukumalogy. And so this way, I think I can kind of offer you some sort of familiarity to not only Sanshinji but the Dogen teachers' lineage. So I'm also taking this exact cutout from Ukumalogy's wonderful book called Realizing Genjo Koan. It says, Dogen said that to see one reality from two sides, which is relative and absolute, is not enough. He said he would also express, he said we should also express these two sides of one action. So this is really about action. So I really like to focus on this action portion by talking about all these texts, etc., etc. And by doing so, I like to talk about lots of fun episodes, not only episodes with Ukumalogy, but also things I heard from Ukumalogy's community and Sawaki Roshi's community. So that's my wishes and theme. So I'm going to pick up where I left off last week. So, if you remember, this is around the millennium, and I met Ukumalogy, and the first two books I received from Ukumalogy was, both of them are Sawaki Roshi's teaching. And on the top, this was the book, actual book. Actually, it's not the actual book. The actual book was an old one, but this is a revised one, and it's currently available one. But as you see, this was a commentary, a very detailed commentary on Kannongyo. And then you remember I said, the first response I had was, are you kidding me? And the reason was, Ukumalogy is a little older than me, but we are basically baby boomer generation in Japan. And then when we were growing up, Japan was going through quite a difficult time. So society was kind of looking for new principle to grasp on to live. And then people are still very poor and struggling. So therefore there was a huge arisal of almost like a cult-like new religion groups. And many of those religion groups actually utilized, well, as you know, Kannongyo is Avalokiteshvara Sutra, is a nickname, so to speak, of chapter 25 out of 28 chapters of Kurumajiva's translation of Lotus Sutra. So this group actually placed Lotus Sutra as if their own Bible. But how they are reading the Lotus Sutra was very different from what Dogen and Dogen teachers really understand. It's basically about if you pray to Lotus Sutra, if you pray to Kannon, your disease, illness will be healed, and you will gain money, etc., etc. So I actually had a really bad experience with one of those cult-like new religion when I was a child. So I had a very bad impression over Lotus Sutra. And later on, I found so much comfort and solace when Ukumalogy also told me he also had a bit of that kind of idea about Lotus Sutra. It took a little while for us, for our generation, to kind of retrieve the real value of Lotus Sutra. So I really felt, well, but I should try, because Ukumalogy is telling me to read this. And then this was a big surprise to me. And it really kind of created a huge benchmark. And then my direction, not only just understanding and the study, but the direction of my whole life principle, which of course affected what I was doing. I was a hospice chaplain. So the practice at bedside, in hospital, hospice residence, just totally started to change. So I'd like to introduce you some of those portions. So I believe this is everybody's common knowledge, but just in case, Lotus Sutra is a translation of Saddharma Pundarika Sutra. Saddharma Pundarika Sutra, Sad is correct, wondrous, and excellent, and of course dharma. And Pundarika is white lotus. And as you probably have heard about this, the image of lotus flower is not only utilized for Buddhism, but it actually precedes birth of Buddhism. But I don't know if you're familiar with the real Lotus Sutra, because every time someone tells me, Issan, do you want to go see lotus in botanical garden? And I say, yeah, and then I go, and what they have is a water lily. But lotus, well, someday I really wish you would come with me. And I'd like to show you these lotus ponds in Japan. Lotus is quite immense. The leaf is really big. But the point is, it only arises from a very, very muddy, dirty water. And then as it arises, grows, and then if it comes through this muddy water and it starts to lift up, this is daffodil, yes? Mm-hmm. Yes. As daffodil also comes out, it's like a bowing this way, yeah? And then as it starts to open, it goes up this way. And then lotus flower is quite large. So the bud opens, in a very quiet, particularly at night. If you are staying along the lotus pond, it just kind of gives up a sound, like seriously, like kind of sound, and it opens. When it comes out, incredibly, these leaves and the buds and the flower are water repellent. So therefore, even though it comes from a really dirty water, muddy water, when it comes beyond, it's just so unaffected with this dirt. So obviously, ancient Indian folks really saw some sort of symbol in it. And I think this is also, the title itself is the core point of the teaching, which I really didn't know at that time, of course. So in this, this was my first teaching I received from not only Sawakiroshi, but from Ukumalogy as well. But it was just, eventually I started to, grasp lots of commentaries from Sawakiroshi and of course Uchiyama Roshi. And each one of them always start from the principle, which was actually quite a big surprise to me. the principle starts. So what is religion? When we start say religion, when I say religion in the English word, in my mind I'm using the word shukyo. And shukyo is the kind of unfortunately translated as a religion because the image is completely different. Shukyo's shu means principle and kyo is teaching. So shukyo to us, to them, is some sort of teaching the principle of life. So that whatever happens, you can really rely on this principle and get through this challenging time. And this is also set you up in the direction wherever you find yourself, whatever situation it is. And so this principle probably has been taught by many other people. But in our case, it was taught from Buddha. So therefore, we call it as Bukkyo, Buddha's teaching. And then that is translated into English as Buddhism. So it's actually not ism, really, maybe. So from the starting point, I think I had a little bit of a gap at that time. Because, I came to the United States 40 years ago. And then my first legal guardian was my long-distance uncle and aunt. And they are basically someone from internment camp generation. So therefore, after they left internment camp, their almost life task was try to merge into American community as much as possible, so that they would be regarded as mainstream Americans. So when I moved to the United States, they told me, Hajime, that's my given name, Hajime, you really have to live like American. You have to eat like American, so that you will be just completely merged into American society. And so therefore, whatever you do, you try to do it in English only. So up to that point, despite the fact I'm quite fluent in, I'm obviously much more fluent in Japanese, I didn't try to read anything about Buddhism in Japanese at all. So I was always studying Buddhism in English, and I was trying so hard, so much so, I didn't really even pay attention to the word difference between shukyo and religion and bukkyo and Buddhism. So that was a big surprise. And then he says, there is basically two different types of approach to, let's say, religion. And one of the most permanent, almost all over the place, one of the most visible one is the type of the approach, I want something out of this. So therefore, let's say if this is a Zen situation, you train and train and train and train, you so hard, you train, and someday you go there and you get this thing called enlightenment. And then, you want something and you pray to some sort of absolute being and say, let's say, Kannon-sama, or Amida-sama, or Shaka-sama, and please give me opportunity to win the lotto so I can get out. Well, that's kind of funny situation, but many times we actually do that. And then, but then that is actually not what the Buddha did. And that's what all of this actually explains. As a matter of fact, Buddha didn't really start from this hypothesis of I want something. Instead, he went into this question of, so what is this I? What is this thing called desiring this and wanting to fix this and wanting to help this, etc., etc. And then he goes toward this sense of I and then examine it. And by doing so, he basically reawakens to the true reality that had always been, will be always here. And then that is called what Buddha was awakened to. It is called body, and it is often kind of mistranslated into the word enlightenment. By now, this is like a norm. But at that time, this is 22 years ago, and particularly because me coming from the childhood, being a part of the Rinzai temple, and also coming to the United States, and first temple I went was Rinzai temple, then being attracted by Dogen, but I was still in the community of Rinzai leaned practice under the name of Soto school. So I was really confused. And also the type of the practice they do is really I walking toward enlightenment type of thing. So this was a really big surprise to me. I hope this isn't a big surprise for you. Maybe by now you're quite clear about that. But in another word, he says, and Ukumalogy says, and everybody says, all the Buddhist text is, in my mind, is a translation of Buddhen. Buddhen is those very authentic and highly trusted traditional texts, such as Pali Canon, or in Mahayana Buddhism, Prajnaparamita Sutras, Lotus Sutras, of course, Avatamsaka Sutra, and of course Dogen's writing. All of them are actually talking about what it is. So what the truth is, what the how this is made, and in this how this is made, organically arises how I should be. So this is basically what it is and how to be is written in Buddhist texts, and that's what we are studying. So I thought, whoa! And particularly in Lotus Sutra, it's really kind of difficult to read because Lotus Sutra is one of the, I think it's probably, according to my knowledge, it's one of the very few, or maybe only, texts, this what it is and how to be is personificated, so to speak. It's a bit like, Greek religion or philosophy always utilizes the invisible image into visible image. So maybe this is some sort of influence, as Ukumalogy says, from Greek culture when Lotus Sutra was starting to arise during the time right after BC 1st, BC 2nd. But anyway, so therefore, when you read it without this principal direction, this also gives you that image of, oh, there's someone called the Kannon, Avalokiteshvara, someone called this and this, and they're doing this and they're doing this. So it's really strange, bizarre almost. So he, of course, pointed out, and then he tries to tell you, how to read it. Now, Lotus Sutra, not only Lotus Sutra, but all of the Buddhist texts tends to have two different ways of writing combined. And this is, as early as oldest layers of Pali Canon, you actually start to see this already. So there's an expression in prose, an expression in poetry, which we call, we usually translate as a verse, but it's a poetry format. Excuse me. Yesterday morning, Ukumalogy was addressing to Italian organization, and then he only had 20 minutes for presentation, but he chose to present Dogen's Waka again and Kanshi, Chinese poetry again, which I just adore. So every time Ukumalogy talks about Dogen's poetry, I always feel like, wow, this is so beautiful. And then one of the questions Ukumalogy received was, so what is the reason why Buddhist text is always utilizing? What is the purpose of usage of poetry? And then recently I've been intensively studying these three teachers, Sawaki Roshi, Uchiyama Roshi, Ukumalogy, sometimes have one particular text giving commentary. So I got hold of, for instance, there's one particular fascicle from Shogunzo. Sawaki Roshi also left a detailed notation, and Uchiyama Roshi left a detailed commentary, and Ukumalogy left a detailed commentary. And particularly those, I also transcribed Ukumalogy's, Genzo-e. I pick Uchiyama Roshi's and Sawaki Roshi and compare. And then it's wonderful. Those three are just totally different people. Each one of them are so different in personality and temperaments, but they are talking about exactly the same thing, but in a very different style. So for me, it's a really wonderful way to kind of deepen and widen the hue of the understanding. So yesterday I was listening to Ukumalogy explaining the difference of between verse and prose. Sawaki Roshi actually does the same thing in this commentary, but in a very different way. So Kannongyo is also written in prose first and then changes into poetry. And then why? Sawaki Roshi says. And in Sawaki Roshi's case, he utilizes pop song of his time. It's a little hard for me to translate that, so therefore my job is actually contemporize it. So therefore I'll try to imitate what Sawaki Roshi did, and so that you kind of get to see the difference of the personality of these teachers. So this is the difference between, I say, I will always love you. I will always love you in prose. Vis-a-vis, I say, I'll always love you. Oh, my darling you. Oh. These two are definitely sending different hues of emotion. And sometimes, I'm temperament-wise, I'm closer to Ukumalogy. I'm kind of heady, and that's sometimes a kind of problem for me. So I usually prefer what Ukumalogy does, this one step and next step and building up the logic. But at the same time, this actually makes sense. It's very interesting. So after I read that portion, I really started to pay attention to, by the way, he does line by line notation, prose portion, then going to line by line notation of poetry portion. But because of the restriction of the time, I just want to put out some portion of the poetry portion. And in this poetry portion, oh, by the way, I think this is a common knowledge, but this what it is, Buddha was reawakened to, which means the true reality, has been explained in a many different ways. In early Gautama Buddha's own word, as you all know, like Four Noble Truths, 12 links of causation. And my favorite is, of course, 3 dharma seals, or sometimes it's called 4 dharma seals, because number 3 and 4 are flip side, this side and this side. And then in Mahayana Buddhism, it gets more and more refined, and most highly known one is form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Shiki sokuze, kuku sokuze, shiki. This all explains of this true reality, total function. And then Avatamsaka Sutra utilizes this almost like a pictorial diagram image of Indra's net. And that's something Ukumalogy always utilizes in Genzo-e to explain this what it is. And many of you who are familiar with Ukumalogy's Genzo-e, he always has some spot during those 5 days or 8 days of Genzo-e. He has this pictorial image of this net-like image, which sometimes I've been attending Ukumalogy's Genzo-e repeatedly over and over and over, and I sometimes have this small team of the people come with me. And so, for instance, when I'm sitting with Doryu-san and Gyoet-san from Rome, and Misaki from San Francisco, and Hector San Francisco. When Ukumalogy starts to draw this net, we kind of look at each other and smile, like, here we go again. Yes. That's actually very helpful. And then, as a disciple, our role is not to copy our teacher. So I was wondering if you have seen this one. Can someone point this, focus on this? But probably I can do, you can just pass it around later. This is from, I really need to give a credit first. This is something I received from Todaiji. Todaiji is in Nara, and they are still the center of International Avatamsaka Sutra Research Center. And in there, they have this Kangakuin. Kangakuin is a free school, and you can go and take classes all the time. And then they actually give you this diagram. So in other words, this is if you have a magnifying glass, and then spot that net portion, not portion of Ukumalogy's, pictorial image, and that's how our existence is, so to speak. It's like analysis of existence. So this is Ukumalogy's picture. It's a not portion, and let's say this is I. So my self is a combination, moment by moment by moment, place by place by combination of all of these elements. Just for the sake of it, it has A, B, C, D kind of lines. But just imagine there's just immeasurable numbers of the combination. Of course, I don't have to explain this anymore. But we are combination of, let's say, water I drink, air I breathe, and food I eat, and also internally I'm a combination of culture in America, culture in Japan, culture in France, and also I'm also utilizing the language. So therefore, I'm a combination of the entire history of the language, which means entire history of the culture, entire history of the people, and then it just somehow this moment, this time, it combines, and then somehow it creates me. But this created me is also constantly changing. So therefore, as a matter of fact, there's not even one microsecond moment that this A, actually exist. And so it's just complete interdependent origination. And that's what Ukumalogy always utilizes, this word, interdependent origination. So this is also explained in a different way. And if you really start to clarify this organically, how you should be behaving in this world, how you live your life, how you conduct your life, actually appears. So that's the Buddhist teaching. And of course, Kannongyo as well utilizes a very unique way to explain it. So one of the portions I really like to introduce is, this is my most, the portion I got the most inspiration is in the poetry portion. There's this very interesting portion that shows up. It's normally called the 12 challenges. How it works is, it's a combination of 5 Chinese characters, kanji, 5 Chinese characters, and 5 Chinese characters. And on this side, there's another 5 Chinese characters. And then it's combined with another 5 Chinese character. It calls Nenpi Kannon Riki. I see Hoko-san, yeah, because this is something we recite every morning in Soto School's temples in Choka. Nenpi Kannon Riki. So therefore it goes da 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 da, Nenpi Kannon Riki, da 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 da, da 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 da, Nenpi Kannon Riki, da 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 da. On this side, it's a description of this incredibly messed up world. Because of that, because of this sense of I. So therefore, this strange, empty thing somehow has something called the brain, and the brain creates this cognitive skill, which is important, of course. But at the same time, this tends to create I, and I versus others. So therefore, I want to be better than you, or I feel inferior to you. I want to run over this, or I'm feeling like run over by it, etc., etc. That is described here. And then between Nenpi Kannon Riki, on the other side, there's a world of this entirety, constantly moving, constantly intermerging. So in other words, this is the world divided into two, meaning self and others. And this side, it is before this two division starts, so to speak. So therefore, my thing is, so what is this Nenpi Kannon Riki that connects these two or merges the two? Nenpi Kannon Riki is, first of all, Kannon. This is a translation of Avalokiteshvara. I hope all of you already have a copy of Ukumalogy's Living by Vow. And in Living by Vow, Ukumalogy has, in his typically step-by-step motion, explain what Avalokiteshvara means. But in short, Avalokiteshvara is seeing the sound. So therefore, there's no connection between me and object. So therefore, Kannon is, well, yet another description of before division starts, divisiveness starts, and also, Buddhist language is always layered. If I see it from this me side, it is my own practice of opening the hand of thought. So keep letting go, and then also basically manifesting this undivided or before division starts, because of this sense of I creeps in, is Kannon. And Nen is a translation of Sati. I think all of you probably know this because current mindfulness practice boom, and also wonderful writing by Thich Nhat Hanh about this very well-known sutra from Pali Canon, usually translated as a for-establishment of mindfulness, I think, yeah. It's a translation of Satipatthana. Sati is, in our language, it's Nen. Nen is, so therefore, it's mindfulness, the moment of the mindfulness. It's almost like throwing the ball towards the wall, and the ball just hits, and that moment is Nen. And the moment of, yes, right. And then P is toward. So therefore, and the last word, Riki, is power. I would say practice, or practice, or gravity, as Ukumalogy often utilizes. So Nenpi Kannon Riki is the, you can actually read it in the way, the type of the gravity, this true reality, even though you may like to bring yourself into this sense of I and try to separate yourself as much as possible, for some reason or another, this pulls you back. And also it is your active aspiration of I want to just stay with the true reality portion, instead we just divide it into this me and competition, etc., etc. So it's an interesting writing of the type of the world which values this survival skill, competitive skill most, vis-a-vis this is the ground where all of us live and die, together. So this is the true reality ground, and this is the secular, so to speak, Nirmanakaya, made-up world, which is combined with this either gravity or my own aspiration, Nenpi Kannon Riki, repeatedly over and over and over and over and over. So I thought this was really wonderful and interesting. And also, this is yet another description of shiki sokuzeku. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And then, of course, this form portion, we can't get out of it because we are human and we have this body and mind. So our practice is, so how do I utilize this shiki wholesomely instead of sucked into this shiki, form, me portion? All of this is very conceptual, I think. But what was really incredible at that time was my encounter with Ukumalogy, my encounter with Dogen teaching proper was around millennium. And I was going back and forth in between San Francisco and New York to study and Zen Hospice project at that time. So what happened right after this was September 10th, year 2001, I just completed another set of program with Frank Oszczewski, the founder of Zen Hospice project. And I needed to go back to New York because I still have a full-time job in New York City at that time. So I took my favorite afternoon flight in San Francisco on September 10th, and then flew back to New York late tonight, and it was a beautiful, clear, sky. And then, we don't do this anymore for the reason I'm going to talk about later, but at that time it was possible for aircraft to go as close as possible on top of Manhattan. As it was such a beautiful day, the pilot said, well, as a customer service today, I really want to fly as close as possible so that you get to see this beautiful view of Manhattan. God, it was so beautiful. I think it was one of the last flight who was able to do that. It was just like a jewel box. Next morning, I was affiliated with Zen Center, Zendo, near World Trade Center, actually. It was on the border of, Soho, Tribeca area. So that day, for some reason or another, I was assigned, it's just like a Sanshinji, that's the rotation. It was my rotation to go to the Zen Center to open for morning zazen. And then morning zazen, just like everybody else, we only have a very small number of the people, but there were 4 or 5 people came. And then I closed the Zen door, and then one of the lady who was constantly coming to join us for morning zazen was someone who worked on Wall Street, few blocks away from World Trade Center. So she takes a train, goes into the subway, and then she usually get out of the subway station in the basement of World Trade Center, then walk to her work. So for some reason or another, I walk her to the subway station, and then I tried to walk toward my home. By the way, my home was also on the verge of Tribeca, and then near as close as West Side Highway. So in another word, I'm looking right in front of me, this huge monolith, which was called World Trade Center. And then shortly after, something really bizarre happened, as you remember. Aircraft just dives into the World Trade Center, and all of us are freezing because we just can't believe what has happened. And it was so unreal. And then I felt almost as if it was like a sci-fi movie. And as a matter of fact, many of those people around me was like starting to give a nervous laugh. And I think that's just a really, normal psychological response. And then everything starts to stop, and then we just feel maybe this is an accident. And then we start to see some large object starts to fall down out from the windows, and someone starts to recognize, oh my goodness, that's people, not the furniture. And then shortly after, next aircraft comes in, and people start to think, okay, this can't be accident. And then everyone started to run around. and then traffic stops, and then car starts to tune up the radios loudly so that all of us can hear. But we are just so frozen and watching it, and then the first building collapsed. And I was one of those people who were just frantically running away so that we would not be caught by this huge tsunami of the debris. But at that time, I think almost unconsciously I started to say, "Kami-sama, Hotoke-sama, Kami-sama, Hotoke-sama," which is a bit like, when you're really sick. I'm sure all of you have this experience. When you're a little boy, little girl, when you're sick and you say, "Mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy," I don't know whichever you will say. I will say mommy maybe. But we are not really calling out Kami-sama, Hotoke-sama. It's a Japanese way of saying Kami is not God, but it's really deities, devas, and Buddhas and ancestors. But my thing was not really thinking about something like God will help me kind of thing, but it was almost like trying to tell me to be staying with this power in this total function. In another word, please put me into the gravity of this true reality, because this true reality, because of this, you never know what happens. Because whatever happens, it's not your fault. It's not your fault because you are there, because it just happens with this immense, interconnectedness. So at that time, I guess I was saying Nenpikan no Riki, in another word, so that I can stay calm. And the next thing I thought was, I think this is where Shogunzo Shishobo comes in. Because I think you probably already know this, because I have heard you've been studying this Shishobo. But Dogen has this wonderful writing called in Shobugenzo in Shui, Bodhisattva Shishobo. And this Shishobo originally comes from Pali Canon's expression, Katari Sangha Vatuni. And Katara Sangha Vatuni in Pali Canon is one of those dharma numbers. So it's almost presented as you do this and you do that and you do this and you do that. But Dogen really utilizes in his most unique, wonderful way. This is also yet another description of what it is. So, this is giving, kind speech, beneficial action, and non-separation action. And so in this true reality, as a matter of fact, there's no division between me, I give this important to you, kind of structure. So therefore, this is a free giving, free receiving, giver, receiver, gift actually are all empty situation. So therefore, this is the situation, not that as let's say, as Barney Grassman often captures this as, if your right hand is injured, you almost organically, immediately, left hand covers it. So it's not like, well, I like you, so I'm going to be kind for you. So there, it's not that situation. Yeah. So in the same manner, organically, you do something nice, you do something helpful, because this is me. So therefore, this me covers each other. So what happened was, I think it was probably because of this Nenpikan no Riki. My thought was not about why did this happen, who is the bad one, etc., etc. But I really thought, oh gee, what should I be doing right now? I had this very hard-working young man sharing my house at that time. And then he's a very hard-working person. He gets this deadband shift. So he's still sleeping. This is like early morning, 9 something. And I had this doggy probably catching this old sound, and he's probably freaking out. So my thought was, okay, let me go back first. And then, well, the rest is story, history, so you already know. But I think the most hardest portion was on the third day, the direction of the wind changed. And so because of this direction of the wind, the first 2 days, it was all of those huge smoke and debris was going towards the ocean. Now it came back at us. We only needed to evacuate one day, but a few blocks down from us, everyone was evacuated for months and months and months. And this whole air came to us. And then it was such really, really incredible teaching, because you don't smell just the chemical smell only, but you smell burnt flesh. And then you really start to understand, okay, I'm breathing in, and this smell as a little particle, not only those 3,000 people who died in the building, but also including the terrorists themselves. So I'm also breathing in, actually physically breathing in the people who died, including terrorists' body, and this is really merging into myself as well. And this is a total just physical description of investment. And then luckily, before I got into this, sucked into divisional mind, hospice called, and then they said, all the traffic is stopped, and we are just calling out just anybody, even though you are not in the shift today, anybody who can get to the hospice right away on foot. The hospice I used to work with at that time was about 30 minutes walking distance, so I went. It was just such an incredible feeling of 3,000 people dies immediately. It's unfathomable. You really can't grasp the whole thing. But at the same time, when you go to the hospice, there's an immediate thing you can do. And there's this people who are at the terminal stage of their life and then affected by this horrible news. And then therefore, they really need more support. So in front of you, instead of in your thoughts of 3,000 people, in front of you, you have one person you need support. I really felt it was such a timely teaching almost. Then I really saw the power of the teaching at that time. And each moment you step into that type of very difficult, challenging situation, what you do is you bring yourself back, or you let yourself brought into this gravity of total reality, and just focus on right here, right now, instead of focusing on what your thoughts are creating. So this Kannongyo teaching became such vivid, realistic teaching. And I really started to see my whole principle of hospice practice. At that time, I just received a proposition from a bank in Japan, so that I was starting to convert my father's former business quarter building, demolishing it and rebuilding into personally supported public clinic and hospice residence. So I had lots of things and lots of questions going on, but this Kannongyo's teaching, Dogen's teaching, teaching Ukumalogy and Ukumalogy's teachers gave to me at that really timely moment, really helped me to go through this challenging time. So this 12 challenge portion is real, seriously. So I'm sorry I spoke too much, but I actually barely spoke about half of the things I wanted to talk about. I don't know, I'm usually a very quiet person. Everybody who knows me knows I'm so quiet at home. Paul is also very quiet. We barely talk, so people always feel like, but once I started to, talk about, Dogen's teaching, I feel so excited and I can't stop. So anyway, next week I think we are working, but
yes.
the following 3 times I'm going to switch this into koan study, but I'm going to talk about the same thing, and probably at that time the things I really wanted to offer today I can incorporate into it. But anyway, would you like to say something? Yes, please.
So, I think the nuance of Viki as gravity is really interesting. Because we think about Joriki Dariki, our own practice, our own power, our other power. So this thing about gravity feels to me like opening the hand, because we open the hand, we let go of something. And if we don't get in the way of gravity, the default is we go toward whatever that is. So I think as a practice, that's really interesting. I was going to suggest, because not everybody here probably knows those challenges and how that would be in English, I was going to say, well, could you describe those? You just did. Because on the one hand, it's, when the world is on fire, remember Kannon. When you're in the middle of a flood, remember Kannon. Well, you just did. But maybe it would be helpful for folks who may not be familiar with that, what kind of challenges those are talking about.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, it's really real. So we read those things about, well, when the world is on fire, well, when the world is being washed away by flood, and we just think, oh, that's a big, we're not all in the midst of disaster every day.
Yeah.
And so those sound like big, sort of unimaginable things, and for most of us, we're not confronted with 9/11 right in front of us, So maybe you would like to say a little bit about those 12 challenges, what they actually are, and then how we maybe think about that in terms of Nenpi Kannon-Niki and just going forward moment by moment.
Sure. So, because of the time restriction, I need
That's another whole talk.
maybe I need two more. But just very, very briefly, I was going to offer not just dramatic, experience, but this is also daily, moment-by-moment exercise, so to speak, practice. Because, for instance, sometimes I meet somebody who says something to me, and then there's an immediate response arises with me. But then I do, this Nenpi Kannon-Niki practice is just a very simple stop and watch what arises before you make next action. So for instance, sometimes I meet somebody who tells me, let's say, something offensive, right? And then my immediate response is, I want to tell him off. But then I stop. Me being not a native speaker of English actually helps my practice, because I can't come up with this really smarty pants kind of response right away. So I have to stop anyway, and then with this tiny little stop, you start to bring this opening the hand of thought, Nenpi Kannon-Niki portion, and then what I would say may be probably different, because this flicker moment, I would go, well, he has his own programming, I have my own programming, and I have my own background, he has his own background. So it's quite understandable. He thinks this way towards something. So therefore, I stop and I do something else. So that flicker moment is Nenpi Kannon-Niki as well. So in this text, as Hoko-san just mentioned, some description is kind of drastic situation. But again, Buddhism is nothing about me versus something outside. So we really have to read this as something happening within me or within my own world. So therefore, the first one starts with the sense of someone's tossing me off from somewhere high. Don't you all have that experience in your schools, or graduate school, or your research center, or your work, corporate organization? And then Nenpi Kannon-Niki. And then you see there's nobody pushing, nobody being pushed. There's just a situation there, and how shall we do? And also, one of my favorite is this little worms. There's a, description, on this side of the description, there's a tiny little worms, and then it also describes mukade. Mukade is a Japanese centipede, but it's quite large, and it's really toxic. And then I think Hoko-san is such a fearless person, but I think the only thing Hoko-san was really afraid was Japanese mukade. I was speaking with the dojo about this wonderful temple in Nagasaki, and then I went there together with my dharma friends to join Genzo-e once. And then they were like really strong, men from Kyushu are very masculine and strong type people. But in the middle of the night, there was one wonderful monk started to scream like, ah! And then we all woke up and then, what happened? Mukade! But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm speaking too long. But anyway, this is a combination of tiny little bugs. And this is actually originates from the description of a Pali Canon about, we have this main structure with 3 poisons. But when something very strikingly visible happens, we can catch it. But out of these 3 poisons, there are attributes, or what's the word, tributary streams, so to speak. And then those tiny little ones, you are not particularly conscious. Sometimes you kind of carry this sense of, I'm kind of frustrated and bothered, but I really don't know what. But if you don't take care of these tiny little bugs, it can actually create huge things. Like, tiny little fire flame in the ash, which we thought we actually turned off, could cause a fire. So it even suggests this minor, tiny little, often we discard thing, let's pay attention. So there's this incredible hues of examples. For many years, every time I have a question about my life, or I have some trouble of my life, I usually read Buddhist texts, because Buddhist text is quite thorough. I once heard either Ukumalogy or Sakiroshi's commentary, they also mentioned something about Buddhist text carries entire human experience. So even though everything changes, but there may be some kind of pattern of the trouble you are handling with is written in Buddhist text, and you will see what these people actually handled. So I always feel that way. And then in these 12, challenges, a bit like a representation of those things. So I took a lot of inspiration from a very daily matter to something drastic that happened. I hope this. Oh, but of course, as Hoko-san mentions, because of the translation, it's very misleading. Because this is why Ukumalogy always says we have 3 or 4 available translation of Lotus Sutra, but none of them. He never really criticizes anything. He just So if you read it, it's read by someone who read it literally from me versus thing. So it looks almost like when you are troubled by this, just say Nembi Kannonriki, everything will be fine, kind of So please be careful when you read this. That's not the intention of the Lotus Sutra. So
It comes across as really devotional
yeah.
in some English translations, and I think that's enough to put some Westerners off.
Yes.
They said that doesn't apply to me because my practice doesn't feel devotional.
Yes.
So I think what you're doing here is really important
Yeah.
by saying Nenki Kannonriki is not about I call on something out here to save me. It's about I relax into the gravity of being pulled back into one reality from 2 sides and taking 2 sides in one action. So I think that's an important piece, and I'm glad you've raised it.
Thank you. And of course, that also relates to the fact that it is not the gravity I choose to go, but at the same time, they too. I mean, true reality itself. We are completely supported by true reality. The fact that I am here now in this shape is because of this true reality. And so therefore, it's not like I do something wonderful thing to the true reality as a beneficiary action, but this whole total function itself has already given me as their beneficiary action. So that's also layered portion about this gravity, I think.
Yeah, there's no I calling on karma.
Right.
There's just universe doing what the universe does
Yeah.
if we get out of the way.
Yes. And I think that is a very important portion when we study this beneficiary action portion.
So I'll stop talking too now.
Yeah.
You and I get together, Issan, 2-3 hours go by.
Yes. 4 hours went by the other day.
Anybody else? Any comments from the virtual world?
Oh, I should say this. So this doesn't have English access at this time. So therefore, what I did was during the time of quarantine, I asked a few of my friends to get together with me each week, and we spent 8 months. I vocally explained what he says line by line, and then we kind of put our own examples together about what he says, and then we transcribed that conversation, and I'm currently editing it. So this way, it's not a direct translation of the commentary book, but you probably get to see what he's talking about a little more in a contemporarized way. And I thought that would be better. So eventually this will be put together, and somehow I'm going to either ask Sanshinji to post it, or I post it in my blog, or etc. etc. So anybody who's interested in reading it to be able to read.
So if anyone has a question online, just speak up. You don't need to wait or anything.
Thank you, Issan. This is Arnold. So I'm just curious, the character T and the character Riti, I'm thinking it's Chikara, the character for Chikara, are they the same? Are they both the same?
Oh
kanji,
no,
or are they different?
no. Nenpi's P is I would translate as a towered, but this is this is the translation portion, which always gets me a little confused, because this is that, there, so this way. So vis-a-vis this and that. So if you read it literally as me versus this, it does sound like placing Nen on someone whose name is Kannon. But I'm reading it as placing Nen toward Kannon. So as a matter of fact, Sawaki Roshi explains how to read Nenpi Kannon Riki 3 triple way. And then I think I kind of incorporated those way into what I just explained. But it's definitely not vis-a-vis me praying toward Kannon. But I do understand you have a quite good knowledge of the Japanese language, so I appreciate where you are.
Oh, no, I'm just starting. But thank you.
Thank you.
Sawyer.
As we sort of think about words and translations and the back and forth of language, I'm sort of thinking about how, as the towers were collapsing and that phrase, those words come up for you, and how do you see sort of words as part of that gravity? So just sort of like remembering words sort of reminds you to let go into the gravity. Is that?
I think in my case, reciting 4 Bodhisattva vows, sometimes I don't even have time. But if there's one phrase, I can just put myself back into that bodhicitta portion, just like Ukumalogy says, our practice is raising bodhicitta 100万発 is how many times? But I would say billions of times a day, because we tend to slip into this portion. So in a very challenging time, not only very challenging time, but in just tiny little moments, some kind of annoyance comes into your world. My way of doing it is basically kind of almost without a word, bring it into, instead, reciting for Bodhisattva verse. But very often it kind of organically happens, and I'm just saying something without really thinking about to say something. So in that case, again, when I was a little kid, when I have problem, I would say, "Okasan, Okasan." And in this case, I would say, "Nenpikan nonriki." But what I'm really intending to do is push me back into this life force, instead of bringing me out from this life force by this, I think this is bad, I think this portion. But instead of doing that, can I be just continue to be in the part of this incredible, unfathomable, without just behaving out of my own personal desire or opinions.
So it sounds a bit to me like gata practice.
Yes.
So, in the training temple, there's a little 4-line verse for everything we do, from shaving the head, going to the bathroom, brushing our teeth. Every single thing, there's a verse we can say. And the whole point of that is riki. Bring us back to, let go of, there's me shaving my head, there's something else happening here. So, in the West, sometimes people really like those little gatas, and they post them around in their apartment. So every time you look in the mirror, you do, because it's a way to use those words, I think, to remind you, practice, 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 right? Practice, remember to practice, remember what Buddha taught all the time. And to me, that feels like a handrail, until we can let go of the handrail.
Yes.
And we, a little bit like what you were saying, we don't need the words to do that. There's some physical remembering. Right? But those gatas feel helpful sometimes, right?
Yes. Soya is going to start to live with us as of today, actually. And then as an experiment, you kind of came in from time to time, and you called me one day. I was saying, Nyakonjikiji Tokai Shujo Zenezijiki Hoki Juman. Instead of a long recitation of Hoki, Oryoki, that's a gatha to remind myself into what I'm doing with eating. And that's one of the gathas we use. And I recently read a wonderful book written by Norman Fisher, utilizing Tibetan system of gatha, lojon, into much more contemporized American life. Doesn't even have to be Buddhist life, but utilizing this kind of one-liner reminder until it becomes almost like a habit. So I think all of us actually organically does this, I think.
Shall we wrap it up? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much.